You ever get ignored in Slack and immediately assume the worst? One DM goes unanswered and suddenly you're convinced your teammate's upset, the project's in trouble, and maybe you just tanked the relationship. One missed DM turns into a full weekend of overthinking, and then Monday comes and you find out the truth. They just never saw the DM. No hidden agenda, no tensions, just a missed DM. We often build elaborate stories around simple problems. We often assume complexity when there really is no complexity at all. So if you've ever caught yourself overanalyzing a situation or reading too much into silence, stick around because today we're going to talk all about a principle that might just help you stop spinning those stories and start seeing things a little more clearly. What's up, UX fam? Welcome to another edition of the Cognition Catalog, where every week we'll dig into a new cognitive bias and explore how that bias can impact how our team works together and what we can do to ensure we don't get caught up in the pitfalls. Because working with people is hard, and the more insights we have into the human condition make it just a little bit easier. To learn more about Occam's razor, you can find more resources at cognitioncatalog.com and click the little bell down there so you get notified when a new episode drops so you never have to worry about falling for any of these cognitive biases again. Shout out to this week's sponsor, Mobbin. If you're tired of staring at a blank Figma canvas, Mobbin gives you access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI screens and user flows with a library that grows bigger every week. Kickstart your creativity, streamline your workflow, and level up your design process. Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. For more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. So you ever have one of those moments at work where your brain writes a whole novel out of almost nothing? Well, a while back, I sent a message to one of my engineers on a Friday afternoon. Just a quick follow-up on a design handoff, nothing major, just a polite little, hey, just wanted to make sure you saw that update. And then silence. An hour went by, then the whole afternoon, then the entire day, and I started to freak out. Maybe they thought I was overstepping. Maybe he was annoyed that I was pushing for a change so close to the weekend. And the more I thought about it, the more personal it felt. And by Monday, I was convinced that something was wrong. I'd built a full story all around it, all the motives, the emotions, all of it, based entirely on one unanswered email message. And then finally, during stand-up on Monday morning, I mentioned the message. He looked up and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I totally missed it." And that was it. The entire problem vanished in an instant. And I just sat there realizing how much time I'd spent building complexity around something so incredibly simple. And that's why Occam's razor is so important. That old philosophical principle that says the simplest explanation is usually the best one. When multiple explanations could fit, start with the one that makes the fewest assumptions. And in theory, we all get that. But in practice, especially at work, we tend to forget. When someone doesn't reply to an email, we assume that they're ignoring us. When a project goes sideways, we imagine hidden politics. When feedback feels off, we jump straight to, they don't trust me, instead of maybe they just phrased it poorly. Our brains love filling in blanks with complexity. It's faster, and somehow it feels more satisfying than assuming that something ordinary like bad timing or missed context or a simple human error. Occam's razor reminds us to pause before we pile on assumptions, to look for the clean, straightforward explanation before constructing elaborate ones. It's not telling us to ignore nuance or pretend like everything is fine. Instead, it's a reminder to resist the urge to dramatize uncertainty. If the code isn't working, check the syntax before rewriting the system. If someone feels distant, assume that they're busy before deciding that they're mad. Now, most of the time, it's not conspiracy or a grand failure. It could just be a missed message on a Friday afternoon. So what is Occam's razor? Well, let's dig into it. When we face multiple explanations for a situation, we should start with the simplest one that adequately fits the facts. Occam's razor reminds us not to assume complex motives or hidden causes when a straightforward explanation is likely the answer. Occam's razor originated with the 14th century philosopher and theologian William of Occam, and he argued that entities should not be multiplied beyond necessity. So in simple terms, he said we shouldn't add unnecessary layers to an explanation when a simpler one already fits the evidence. The principle evolved from medieval theology into a cornerstone of scientific reasoning. Notable thinkers like Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein echoed this idea in different forms, and in modern science, medicine, and engineering, it's a guide for hypothesis testing. Start simple and only add complexity when the evidence calls for it. But outside of science labs, the same principle applies to the daily collaboration of cross-functional teams. Human interaction tends to be messy, and we often overcomplicate them with assumptions. When a colleague misses a meeting, we might assume that they're disengaged or disrespectful, but more likely, they probably had a scheduling conflict or they simply forgot. Occam's razor helps us to remember to pause before attributing intent or complexity when no intent or complexity ever existed. And it's important to remember that most bugs, misunderstandings, or team conflicts, more often than not, stem from something simple, maybe a misdependency, unclear communication, or incorrect assumptions rather than elaborate sabotage or a deep system failure. And when it comes to team dynamics, Occam's razor encourages psychological safety and it reduces unnecessary friction. When disagreements pop up, applying the principle can de-escalate tensions by inviting curiosity over blame. For example, when feedback seems harsh, the simplest explanation might be poor timing or unclear wording, not malicious intent or some ulterior motive. Leaders and peers who practice that mindset tend to cultivate trust. They approach confusion or conflict by asking, what's the simplest explanation consistent with the evidence first? And that simple reframing can transform tense meetings into productive, collaborative discussions. And in troubleshooting or operational reviews, the same logic should also apply. Teams will often jump to exotic causes, maybe a rare edge case or a mysterious API bug, before checking the basics first. Did we turn it off and on again? Is the cable faulty? Are there misspelled variables? Have the access tokens expired? Starting with the simplest explanation often saves us a ton of time in the long run. And Occam's razor also helps us to balance accountability with empathy. The idea isn't to excuse poor behavior or sloppy work, but it can help prioritize the likelihood of one scenario over the dramatic imagination of another. And once the simplest explanations are rolled out, then it's appropriate to explore more complex causes. But it takes a bit of discipline to resist that complex narrative until the evidence actually calls for it. So what can Occam's razor teach us? Well, here are a few things that I think we can take away. First, start simple before assuming complexity. When a conflict or confusion arises, think about the most direct explanation first. When conflict or confusion arises, think about what the most direct explanations are first. People forget things. Misunderstandings happen. Begin there before building theories about malicious intent or messy politics. Use it to lower emotional temperature. Applying Occam's razor moments can help depersonalize those moments, especially at work. And instead of thinking, they don't respect me, think, maybe they misheard or they missed the message. That small shift can change the tone of your response, and it can lead to a better outcome for everybody. Next, debug human systems like technical ones. When a project stalls, check the simple stuff. Alignment, clarity, communication. Do that before assuming a deep cultural or structural problem. Simplicity often explains the dysfunction much better than the drama. Occam's razor isn't telling us to ignore nuance or complexity. Think of it as a starting point. It's not gospel. Don't outright dismiss complex realities, but explore them once the basics are finally ruled out. And then lastly, build team habits around verifying assumptions. During retros and postmortems, make it normal to ask, what's the simplest explanation that fits here? And this can prevent blame spirals, and it builds a culture of shared, level-headed reasoning. Well, all right, y'all, that's it for the Cognition Catalog for today. I hope I helped to shed a little bit of light on Occam's razor and how we can avoid some of those pitfalls related to complexity at home and at work. But I'm curious, have you run into any of those issues with overcomplicating things? Has Occam's razor helped you? I'd love to hear about it. Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. To learn more about Occam's razor, you can find more resources at cognitioncatalog.com and click the little bell down there so you get notified when a new episode drops so you never have to worry about falling for any of these biases again. And if you want to pick up some big, beautiful art prints of some select biases, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/shop. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the promo code YouTube to get 10% off your entire order. And if you have a favorite bias that you want to see in print, let me know. I'd be happy to take requests. If you're tired of staring at a blank Figma canvas, Mobbin gives you access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI screens and user flows with a library that grows bigger every week. Kickstart your creativity, streamline your workflow, and level up your design process. Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. Help keep the show independent and ad-free. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/support to find out how. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, Zoe, and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free. You'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all.